My name is Autumn Wilson, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would switch drinks with her mother-in-law. But when Trevor handed me that coffee with the strange smell this morning, something in my gut screamed that something wasn't right. After 5 years of marriage, I've learned to recognize when things feel off, especially with Vivian's constant abuse wearing me down day after day. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself when it matters most. Before I met Trevor, I had built a successful career as an interior designer in Boston, and I was proud of what I had accomplished by 30. My life was busy but fulfilling, client meetings during the day, sketching designs in the evenings, and weekends spent antiquing or visiting open houses for inspiration. Then came that fateful charity gala 5 years ago. It was a fundraiser for historic preservation, held in a beautifully restored 19th century mansion. I was there both as a donor and because I had helped with some of the restoration work. Trevor Wilson was representing his investment firm, which had sponsored the event. He was tall, with kind blue eyes and an easy smile that made the formal attire seem less stuffy, and shared my appreciation for history and architecture. On our third date, he brought me to a small abandoned Victorian house his firm had acquired and asked for my professional opinion on restoring it. I was touched that he took such an interest in my work, the mark of a man who respected women and family bonds. The first signs of trouble came when Vivian visited for 2 weeks after our honeymoon. She was a striking woman in her early 50s then, always impeccably dressed in designer clothes, her silver-streaked dark hair perfectly styled. She carried herself with the confidence of old money, though Trevor later admitted they had struggled financially until his father's shipping business took off when he was in high school. During that visit, Vivian rearranged our kitchen while I was at work, explaining that, "This is how Trevor likes things organized." She criticized the dinner I had prepared, wondering aloud how Trevor could eat such heavy food when he had always been careful about his diet. When I showed her the before and after photos of a restoration project I was particularly proud of, she merely said, "Interesting choice of colors. Very bold. I suppose some clients prefer that sort of thing." Trevor never noticed these digs. When I gently mentioned that his mother seemed to be critical of me, he laughed and said, "That's just Mom's way. So sensible." I tried countless approaches to maintain peace. I invited Vivian to collaborate on redecorating her own home, hoping we might bond over a shared project. I researched her favorite authors so we could discuss books. I even took cooking classes to improve the meals she so often critiqued. Nothing worked. To Vivian, I was the woman who had stolen her perfect son, and no effort on my part could change that. The worst part was watching Trevor's gradual transformation. The supportive, confident man I'd married slowly became withdrawn and conflict avoidant at home. He worked longer hours, often missing dinner. When present, he would flinch at the slightest disagreement between Vivian and me, immediately trying to smooth things over without addressing the underlying issue. He began to echo his mother's concerns, asking if I really needed to take on so many clients, suggesting I dress more appropriately for business meetings. By our 4th anniversary, I had downsized my client list, changed my design aesthetic to something more traditional, as Vivian constantly suggested, and found myself apologizing for taking up space in my own home. The vibrant, creative woman Trevor had married was fading away, replaced by someone who constantly second-guessed herself and walked on eggshells in her own house. The emotional toll was immense. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Johnson, who gently suggested that what I was experiencing might be a form of emotional abuse, not just from Vivian but increasingly from Trevor as well. I rejected this idea at first. Abuse happened to other people in other kinds of relationships, not to successful professional women with loving husbands, not to me. But as I began to recognize the patterns, the isolation from friends who weren't good enough for Trevor's family, the constant criticism disguised as concern, the way I had begun to question my own perceptions and memories, I couldn't deny that something was very wrong. The question was what to do about it, especially as Trevor seemed increasingly under his mother's influence. 6 months ago, everything changed when Trevor's father Howard passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. I had always gotten along reasonably well with Howard. He was a quiet man who spent most of his time working or golfing, and he seemed to appreciate my independence and drive. At family gatherings, he would often escape to talk business with me when Vivian's socializing became too intense. After the funeral, Trevor announced that Vivian would be staying with us temporarily, while she adjusted to life without Howard, suggesting perhaps we could help Vivian find a grief counselor instead. Trevor snapped at me for the first time in our marriage. My father just died, Autumn. My mother needs me, needs us. I can't believe you'd be so selfish at a time like this. I was stunned into silence, and that set the tone for what followed. Vivian moved into our guest bedroom the following week, bringing enough luggage for a year-long stay. What was supposed to be temporary support during acute grief quickly morphed into a permanent restructuring of our household, with Vivian at the center. Within days, she had rearranged our furniture to open up the energy flow. She took over meal planning and grocery shopping, discarding the organic vegetables I preferred as overpriced nonsense. She critiqued my housekeeping, running her finger along shelves and skiing at the dust. When I came home from a client meeting one day, I found she had replaced the living room curtains I had custom designed with heavy brocade drapes that darkened the entire space. Trevor always preferred a more traditional aesthetic, she explained when I questioned the change. I'm just helping restore the home to what he really wants. My anxiety, which had been manageable with therapy, returned with a vengeance. I began retreating to my home office, the one space Vivian hadn't yet invaded. My work suffered as I struggled to focus on designs while straining to hear what was being said about me in other rooms. I lost weight, dropping 10 pounds in a month because I couldn't stomach the heavy, cream-laden meals Vivian prepared. I began sleeping poorly, lying awake listening to Trevor and Vivian talking late into the night. Trevor, meanwhile, began spending more time at the office. He claimed it was a demanding new project, but I suspected he was avoiding the tension at home. When he was present, he was distracted and irritable, snapping at the smallest things. If I questioned any of Vivian's changes to our home, he accused me of being insensitive to her grief. Vivian's controlling behavior escalated from passive-aggressive to overtly hostile. She began checking grocery receipts, questioning why I needed expensive coffee or fresh flowers. She commented daily on my appearance. "Are you feeling well, dear? You look so tired. Perhaps Trevor's right about you working too much." Or, "That outfit is rather youthful for someone your age, don't you think?" One evening, I came home early from a client meeting and overheard Vivian in the kitchen with Trevor. I paused in the hallway out of sight. "I'm just concerned about you, darling," she was saying in that honey-sweet voice she used when being particularly vicious. "You work so hard to provide a beautiful home, and Autumn seems so detached from it all. You know you could have done better. Heather asked about you at Bridge Club last week. She never married. You know, always carried a torch for you." I hoped that Trevor would defend me. Instead, I heard his weary sigh. "Mom, please. Not tonight. I'm too tired for this conversation. Not Autumn is my wife and I love her. Not stop criticizing the woman I chose to marry. Just an exhausted plea to postpone the criticism, not end it." That night I confronted Trevor, which sat empty just 30 minutes away. His response left me cold. "You're overreacting as usual. Mom is still grieving. If you made more of an effort with her, things wouldn't be so tense." He shot back. "You're resentful about your career stalling, and you're taking it out on my mother." I stared at him, speechless. My career hadn't stalled. I had intentionally scaled back to appease him and Vivian. The fact that he couldn't see this revealed how completely disconnected we had become. As the weeks passed, it became increasingly clear that Vivian was trying to drive me away. She accidentally spilled coffee on my design sketches. She scheduled lunch dates for Trevor with former girlfriends. She told neighbors I was struggling with personal issues when they asked why I wasn't attending community events anymore. My best friend Jasmine became increasingly worried. After not seeing me for nearly a month, she insisted on meeting for coffee at a cafe far from my neighborhood. Away from Vivian's watchful eye, I broke down and told her everything. "Autumn, this isn't normal," Jasmine said firmly, grasping my hands across the table. "What you're describing is abuse, and it's affecting your health. You've lost so much weight. You're jumping at shadows. This isn't the confident woman I've known for 15 years. Trevor's just stressed. I found myself saying automatically. And Vivian is grieving. Grief doesn't give anyone the right to be cruel, Jasmine countered. And Trevor is allowing this to happen. He's participating in it. When was the last time you felt safe and happy in your own home? I couldn't remember. By the 6-month mark of Vivian's temporary stay, my physical health had deteriorated noticeably. I suffered from constant headaches and insomnia. I had developed a nervous habit of picking at my cuticles until they bled. I startled at loud noises and flinched when Trevor moved too quickly near me. My doctor wanted to prescribe anti-anxiety medication, but something held me back from starting it. Some instinct warned me to stay clear-headed, despite the emotional pain. The breaking point came last night, during what should have been a pleasant dinner party. And even buying a new dress for the occasion. A deep burgundy wrap style that reminded me of something I would have confidently worn before Vivian moved in. Jasmine came early to help. I felt a glimmer of my old confidence returning. Perhaps this evening would mark a turning point. A reclaiming of my place in my marriage and my home. The first hour went surprisingly well. Our friends, 2 couples from my design days and one of Trevor's colleagues with his wife, seemed to enjoy themselves. Even Vivian was charming, telling amusing stories about her volunteer work and asking thoughtful questions about others' careers. Trevor relaxed visibly, pouring wine generously and laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months. Then, as we moved from appetizers to the main course, Vivian shifted tactics. She began recounting stories from Trevor's childhood, each one subtly emphasizing my inadequacies as a wife. Trevor was always so particular about his food, she said, as I served the roasted salmon I had spent hours preparing. He never did care for fish. But I suppose we all make compromises in marriage. Trevor stiffened but said nothing. Later, as conversation turned to upcoming vacation plans, Vivian sighed dramatically. Trevor always promised to take me to Paris after his father died. We had so many plans. But I suppose young couples need their privacy, even if it means breaking promises to widowed mothers. This was news to me. Trevor and I had been saving for a trip to Portugal, not Paris, and he had never mentioned promises made to Vivian. The final blow came during dessert. I had made Trevor's favorite chocolate soufflés, timing them perfectly to emerge from the oven, just as we finished the main course. As I served them, feeling a hint of pride at their perfect rise, Vivian asked loudly, "Autumn darling, have you told everyone your exciting news?" I froze, spoon halfway to a plate. "What news?" Vivian's smile was venomous. "About the pregnancy test I found in your bathroom trash. I assume that's why you're not drinking tonight." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. "I'm not pregnant," I said quietly, feeling my face burn. "And I haven't taken any test." "Oh." Vivian pressed a hand to her chest in false concern. "I just assumed." "Well, given how you've been eating lately and the weight you've gained, I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. I hadn't gained weight. I'd lost it. Everyone at the table knew this." Before I could respond, Vivian reached for her wine glass and somehow, I still don't know if it was truly accidental, knocked it over. The red wine spread across the white tablecloth and splashed onto my new dress. But not just any dress. I had mentioned earlier that it was made from fabric my late mother had given me before she passed away 3 years ago. "Oh, how clumsy of me," Vivian exclaimed, making no move to help clean up. "Though perhaps it's for the best. That color did nothing for your complexion, dear." The dinner party disintegrated shortly after. Our guests made awkward excuses and left early, with only Jasmine lingering to help clean up and whisper, "Call me tomorrow. We need to talk about this." After everyone left, I confronted Trevor in our bedroom. "How could you let her humiliate me like that? She deliberately ruined my dress, the one made from Mom's fabric. She implied I was pregnant and fat in front of our friends. She undermined everything about this evening." Trevor, loosening his tie, wouldn't meet my eyes. "You're overreacting again. Mom knocked over her wine by accident, and she was just confused about the pregnancy test. She said she saw one in the trash." "There was no test, Trevor. She made that up to embarrass me." "Why would she do that?" he asked, his voice rising. "Why would my grieving mother deliberately try to humiliate you? Do Do you hear how paranoid that sounds? We argued for over an hour, going in the same circles we had for months. Trevor defending his mother. Me trying to make him see the pattern of abuse. Him accusing me of being oversensitive. Me pointing out concrete examples of Vivian's cruelty. Him dismissing each one with an excuse. Finally, exhausted and heartbroken, I asked the question that had been building for months. Do you even love me anymore, Trevor? He hesitated a second too long before answering. Of course I do. I'm just tired of being caught in the middle. If you made more of an effort with Mom. I turned away, unable to hear that familiar refrain again. I cried myself to sleep that night, curled on the far edge of our king-sized bed, while Trevor slept soundly beside me, seemingly unbothered by the chasm growing between us. As I lay there in the dark, I realized with painful clarity that my marriage was crumbling under Vivian's influence, and Trevor had no intention of stopping it. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine leaving, walking away from 5 years of marriage and the beautiful home we had built together. The thought terrified me, but continuing as we were seemed unbearable. Little did I know that the next morning would bring a revelation that would make my decision for me. I woke early after a restless night, my eyes swollen from crying. The house was quiet, and for a moment I allowed myself to imagine it was 3 years ago, before Vivian moved in, before Trevor began to change, when our home still felt like a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. The illusion shattered when I heard movement in the kitchen below. Reluctantly, I dragged myself out of bed, threw on a robe, and went downstairs to face whatever fresh criticism the day would bring. To my surprise, Trevor was in the kitchen alone, dressed for work but cooking breakfast, something he hadn't done in months. 3 mugs sat on the counter beside the coffee maker. "Morning," he said with forced cheerfulness. "I made coffee and I'm doing eggs. Mom should be down soon." I blinked, thrown by this unexpected domesticity. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. Just wanted to do something nice." He wouldn't meet my eyes as he spoke, focusing intently on the eggs in the pan. I noticed his phone on the counter, screen lit with text notifications. Before he could snatch it away, I caught a glimpse of Vivian's name and the words, "Sure it works fast." Trevor quickly pocketed the phone, his movements jerky and nervous. "Coffee's ready. Here's yours." He thrust a mug toward me. I took it automatically, but something felt off. Trevor was acting strangely, checking his phone every few seconds, avoiding eye contact. His usual morning calmness replaced by an almost manic energy. The coffee smelled odd too. Not the rich, nutty aroma I was accustomed to, but something sharper with a bitter chemical undertone. Trevor handed her the 3rd mug. "I need to head out early. Emergency meeting with the Reynolds account." He gulped down his own coffee quickly, grabbed his briefcase, and kissed his mother's cheek. He paused awkwardly by me, then settled for a quick pat on my shoulder. "See you both tonight. Mom, remember you have bridge club at 2. And then he was gone. The front door closing firmly behind him, leaving Vivian and me alone in uncomfortable silence. I stood holding my cooling coffee, that strange chemical smell seeming stronger by the minute. Vivian sipped hers, grimacing slightly. "Trevor always makes it too sweet," she complained, adding more cream. "I don't know how many times I've told him I prefer it black." She launched into her usual morning critique of my appearance. "You really should do something about those dark circles, Autumn. There are excellent creams available. And perhaps a haircut?" Of absorbing criticism and doubt, a spark of the old Autumn, the confident woman who had built a successful business and never took abuse from anyone, flickered back to life. I made a decision in that moment. Not a fully formed plan, but an impulse born of self-preservation and growing suspicion. "Excuse me," I said, interrupting Vivian's monologue about my inadequate skincare routine. "I need to use the bathroom." In the hallway powder room, I locked the door and stood gripping the sink, heart pounding. Was I being paranoid? Was the stress finally making me crack? Or was there something genuinely wrong with the coffee Trevor had been so insistent I drink? I thought about the text glimpse on Trevor's phone. Sure it works fast. What was meant to work fast? And why had Trevor been so nervous? I flushed the toilet for the sake of appearances and returned to the kitchen. Vivian had moved to the breakfast nook and was scrolling through her phone, her coffee mug on the table beside her. My untouched mug sat on the counter where I'd left it. "Vivian," I said with forced casualness, "could you check if the mail came already? I'm expecting an important client contract." Watching her over the rim of the mug, Vivian retrieved what she thought was her mug from the counter and sat back down, resuming her scrolling. "As I was saying before being interrupted, Trevor mentioned you've been especially emotional lately. I wonder if it's hormonal. At your age, perimenopause can begin. My friend Gladys started experiencing mood swings at 35. I was 32, not anywhere near perimenopause, but I let the dig slide. I was too focused on maintaining my composure while watching Vivian drink from the mug that had been intended for me. My guilt at the deception was quickly overshadowed by the phone call Vivian received. She didn't bother to move to another room, clearly not considering me important enough to warrant privacy. I just provide maternal guidance. I felt sick, and not just from the casual cruelty of her words. Medication? What medication? I hadn't been prescribed anything recently. I quietly poured my coffee, the one that had been meant for me, into a nearby potted plant when she wasn't looking. If my suspicions were correct, I didn't want to risk even a small sip. The next 20 minutes were excruciating. I pretended to read emails on my phone while discreetly observing Vivian. She continued complaining about me to her friend, occasionally taking sips of coffee, seemingly unaware of the switch. I kept waiting, watching, wondering if I had imagined the whole thing. Perhaps the coffee was perfectly fine. And months of gaslighting had finally made me truly paranoid. Then, mid-sentence during her call, Vivian stumbled over her words. "The neighborhood association meeting is on. What was I saying, Patricia?" She shook her head as if to clear it and continued, but her speech had become slightly slurred. She blinked rapidly, looking confused. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was definitely wrong with that coffee. 10 minutes later, Vivian's condition had deteriorated noticeably. She had ended her call with Patricia after repeatedly losing her train of thought. Now she sat at the table, looking disoriented and slightly nauseated. "Are you feeling all right, Vivian?" I asked, genuine concern mixing with growing alarm. "I'm fine," she snapped. But her words slurred together. "Just tired. Didn't sleep well." She attempted to stand but swayed dangerously, gripping the table for support. "Let me help you," I offered, moving toward her. "Get away." She pushed my hand aside with surprising force given her condition. "Don't need your help. Never needed you. Trevor doesn't either." She fumbled for her phone, presumably to call Trevor, but her coordination was off. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. I picked it up, intending to hand it back, when the screen lit up with incoming messages. From Trevor. "Did she drink it all? Should kick in soon." From Vivian earlier, "Make it stronger than yesterday. She barely calmed down at all." From Trevor. "Already added extra. Are you sure it works fast enough? Need her calm before the lawyer meeting." From Vivian. "Trust me. This dosage would knock out someone twice her size. Just make sure she drinks it all this time." My hands trembled as I scrolled up, revealing weeks of similar exchanges. References to her medication and keeping her docile peppered the conversation. Discussions of how I was more agreeable after my morning coffee or evening tea. The terrible truth hit me like a physical blow. Trevor and Vivian had been drugging me. Deliberately. Consistently. For months. I thought back to all the times I'd felt inexplicably tired, confused, or disoriented. The important meetings I'd missed. The client I'd lost because I couldn't stay awake during our consultation. The memory gaps. The times Trevor had made decisions about our finances while I was too drowsy to participate. It hadn't been stress or anxiety or grief. It had been systematic drugging by the two people who should have cared for me most. Vivian was now slumping in her chair, her eyes unfocused. "Room spinning," she mumbled. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything, Vivian," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I just switched our coffee mugs. The coffee that Trevor made for me this morning, what was in it?" Her eyes widened with dawning horror as she realized what had happened. She tried to stand again but collapsed back into the chair. "Need to call Trevor," she slurred. You tricked me. Always knew you were manipulative. What were you giving me, Vivian? I pressed, showing her the text messages I'd found. What kind of medication was in my coffee? She tried to grab her phone back but missed, her coordination completely gone now. Just something to calm you down, she mumbled. For your own good. Trevor's idea first. Said you needed help. Too emotional. Ruining everything with your accusations. My hand shook as I dialed 911. Despite everything, I couldn't just stand by while Vivian was clearly in medical distress. Whatever they had been giving me, she had just consumed what the text suggested was an extra strong dose. 911, what's your emergency? I need an ambulance, I said, watching as Vivian's head lolled to one side. My mother-in-law appears to have ingested some kind of sedative. She's conscious but disoriented and having trouble staying awake. After answering the dispatcher's questions and being assured help was on the way, I hung up and turned my attention back to Vivian. She was still conscious but barely coherent. While waiting for the ambulance, I searched Trevor's home office. In the locked bottom drawer of his desk, unlocked now because he'd left in such a hurry, I found a prescription bottle of powerful sedatives. They weren't prescribed to Trevor, Vivian, or me. The label had been partly scratched off, but I could make out that they had been prescribed to someone named Robert Collins, a name I didn't recognize. The implications were staggering. I showed them the pill bottle. I believe she ingested these, possibly dissolved in coffee, I explained. I'm not sure how many. One paramedic examined the bottle while the other checked Vivian's vitals. These are strong sedatives, he said. Not something to mess around with. We need to get her to the hospital right away. Trevor's been giving them to you for months, she slurred, perhaps thinking a confession would somehow help her now. Your tea, your coffee, your food when you got too difficult. My idea to increase the dose. Getting worse. Too emotional. Needed stronger medication. The paramedic gently removed her hand from my wrist, and they wheeled her to the waiting ambulance. I followed in numb shock, trying to process what she had just confirmed. My husband had been drugging me. For months. With his mother's knowledge and encouragement. I just felt cold and hollow as I climbed into the ambulance beside Vivian's stretcher, already reaching for my phone to call Jasmine. I needed a friend, a witness, someone I could trust. Because the two people I should have been able to trust most in the world had been poisoning me to keep me compliant. And I had no idea what would happen when Trevor found out what I had discovered. The hospital emergency room was a blur of activity. Doctors confirmed what I already suspected. Vivian had ingested a dangerous amount of sedatives, likely dissolved in her coffee. The attending physician, Dr. Samuel Patel, explained that they needed to pump her stomach and would keep her under observation for at least 24 hours. These types of medications can cause respiratory depression, he explained. It's fortunate you called 911 when you did. Much longer and the outcome could have been quite different. While Vivian was being treated, a hospital social worker came to speak with me, accompanied by a police officer. Detective Laura Bailey was a compact woman with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mrs. Wilson, we need to ask you some questions about what happened today, she said. And Vivian's semi-conscious confession. I showed them the photos I'd taken of the text exchanges and the pill bottle. So you're saying your husband and mother-in-law have been drugging you without your knowledge or consent? Detective Bailey clarified, her expression grave. Yes, I said. The reality of it still sinking in. Based on their texts, it's been happening for months. That would explain why I've been so tired, confused, and emotionally unstable. I thought it was stress or anxiety, but... And the prescription was not in any of your names? No. Someone named Robert Collins. I've never heard of him. Detective Bailey made notes. Obtaining prescription medication fraudulently is a serious offense. Administering it to someone without their knowledge or consent is even more serious. We'll need to speak with your husband when he arrives. As if summoned by her words, Trevor burst into the hospital waiting area, wild-eyed and disheveled. Spotting me with the police officer, he rushed over. Autumn, what happened? The hospital called and said Mom was admitted. Is she okay? Why are the police here? Before I could respond, Detective Bailey stepped forward, introducing herself and asking Trevor to join us in the consultation room. His face paled as he glanced between us, but he complied. Inside the room, Trevor attempted to take control of the narrative immediately. There must be some misunderstanding. My mother has a heart condition. She probably just forgot to take her medication this morning. Mr. Wilson, Detective Bailey said calmly, your mother did not have a cardiac event. She ingested a dangerous amount of sedatives. The same sedatives we found in your home office, prescribed to someone named Robert Collins. Trevor's expression flickered between confusion and alarm. I don't know what you're talking about. What sedatives? Detective Bailey placed my phone on the table, showing the text messages between him and Vivian. Would you care to explain these exchanges with your mother about medicating your wife without her knowledge or consent? The blood drained from Trevor's face. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, fear certainly, but also something like betrayal, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. Autumn, this is crazy. You're twisting things around. Those texts are about your anxiety medication. You've been so stressed lately, sometimes you forget to take it. So Mom and I were just. I'm not prescribed any anxiety medication, Trevor. I cut in, my voice steadier than I expected. Never have been. I considered starting some recently, but I decided against it. Remember? Well, that was a mistake. Look how emotional and irrational you've become. This is exactly why you need help managing your moods. Mom and I were just trying to help you. His desperate justification chilled me to the bone. In his mind, drugging me without my knowledge was an act of care, not abuse. Detective Bailey interrupted his rationalization. Mr. Wilson, obtaining prescription medication fraudulently is a felony. Administering it to someone without their consent is assault. This is not about helping anyone. It's about control and abuse. As she spoke, 2 more officers appeared at the door. Trevor Wilson, we have a warrant to search your residence and vehicle. We'll need you to come with us to answer some questions at the station. Trevor's demeanor changed instantly. The mask of concern fell away, replaced by cold fury as he turned to me. You did this. You switched the coffee on purpose. You poisoned my mother and now you're trying to frame me. As the officers led him away, still shouting accusations, I sat stunned. Jasmine, who had arrived during Trevor's interrogation, wrapped her arm around my shoulders. It's going to be okay, she whispered, though we both knew nothing would be okay for a very long time. Over the next few hours, the situation unraveled further. The police search of our home revealed more illegally obtained prescription medications hidden in Vivian's room. Not just sedatives but antipsychotics and mood stabilizers as well. They found a journal where Vivian had meticulously documented my treatments and behavior changes, like I was some kind of experiment rather than a human being. Meanwhile, Vivian had stabilized enough to be questioned. According to Detective Bailey, she initially attempted to blame everything on me, claiming I had been the one drugging her due to jealousy of her relationship with Trevor. When confronted with the text messages and the evidence from their home, however, her story began to crumble. For over a year, Trevor had been siphoning money from his investment firm's client accounts, including my business accounts that he had insisted on managing, to reduce my stress. He had used the stolen funds to pay off Vivian's considerable debts, finance her luxury shopping habits, and even purchase a vacation property in her name. We believe this may explain why they were so determined to keep you compromised, Detective Bailey said. You were asking questions about the finances, weren't you? I nodded numbly, remembering how Trevor had become increasingly evasive about our accounts, how he discouraged me from expanding my business despite promising client opportunities, how he'd insisted I was too stressed to handle financial discussions. Trevor was arrested that night on multiple charges: possession of fraudulently obtained prescription drugs, assault, pleas for understanding, and claims that everything he had done was out of love for me. You were falling apart, one message read. The medication helped you. You were happier, more agreeable. We had a good marriage when you weren't fighting me on everything. Please, Autumn. Tell them you consented. Tell them you knew. I can't go to jail. I'll lose everything. I blocked his number. Vivian also tried to reach me, leaving a rambling voicemail about how she had only wanted the best for her son, how I had never been good enough for him, How this was all a misunderstanding that could be cleared up if I would just be reasonable for once. I blocked her too. Over the following days, with Jasmine's support and the guidance of Greg Thompson, the divorce attorney she had recommended, I began the process of disentangling my life from Trevor's. I filed for divorce on grounds of cruelty and criminal behavior. I contacted my clients to explain my sudden absence, and was moved by how many expressed support and offered to continue working with me. The police investigation continued to uncover the extent of Trevor and Vivian's deception. The prescription drugs had been obtained through a network of online pharmacies using stolen identities. The financial fraud extended beyond what they had initially discovered, with Trevor having embezzled nearly $500,000 over 2 years. Throughout it all, Trevor continued his attempts to contact me, through mutual friends, colleagues, even my parents. His messages followed a predictable pattern: deny, then minimize, then justify, then blame me. He had agreed to plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for providing evidence against others involved in the prescription drug scheme. "I just want you to know that everything I did was because I love you," he said, his eyes pleading for understanding. "You were so unhappy, so anxious all the time. The medication helped. You were calmer, more like the woman I married." "The woman you married was confident and independent," I replied, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. "You and your mother systematically destroyed that woman. You didn't love me, Trevor. You loved controlling me." As I stood to leave, he called after me, "What about forgiveness, Autumn? Don't our 5 years together mean anything?" I paused at the door, looking back at the man I had once trusted with my heart, my health, my life. They meant everything to me. "That's why what you did hurt so much. Goodbye, Trevor." Walking away from that meeting, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was making decisions for myself, without sedatives clouding my judgment or abusers undermining my confidence. I knew the road ahead would be challenging. The divorce proceedings would be complicated by the criminal cases. There would be media attention once the story broke. My business would need to be rebuilt. My sense of trust and safety would take even longer to restore. But as I stepped out of the police station into the bright afternoon sunlight, I took a deep breath of clean, clear air, and for the first time in months I felt truly awake. 6 months have passed since that fateful morning when I switched coffee mugs with Vivian. 6 months since I discovered the horrifying truth about my husband and mother-in-law's systematic campaign to drug and control me. 6 months of rebuilding my life piece by careful piece. I'm writing this from my new apartment, a bright, airy space overlooking a small park in a neighborhood across town from the house I once shared with Trevor. It's smaller than our colonial, but every inch of it is mine. I chose the soft blue paint for the walls, the oversized reading chair by the window, the collection of succulents thriving on my balcony. Each element reflects my taste, my preferences, my identity, all the things that had been slowly erased during my marriage. The divorce proceedings are well underway, though complicated by Trevor's ongoing criminal case. He eventually pleaded guilty to lesser charges of fraudulent possession of prescription medications and financial misconduct in exchange for testimony against the network that supplied the drugs. He received a 3-year sentence, eligible for parole in 18 months. The embezzlement charges carried stiffer penalties, 7 years, with restitution requirements that will follow him long after his release. Vivian faced less severe legal consequences due to her age and health, but the social fallout has been devastating for her. The carefully cultivated image of the grieving widow and devoted mother shattered when the story broke. Her country club membership was revoked. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. She sold her house and moved to Florida, where she continues to insist to anyone who will listen that everything she did was out of love for her son. I haven't spoken to either of them since the preliminary hearings. My attorney handles all necessary communications. Sometimes I receive letters from Trevor, all variations on the same themes of justification, blame, and ultimately hollow apologies. I no longer read them. Instead, I focused on healing and rebuilding. Weekly sessions with Dr. Sarah Johnson, my therapist, have helped me process the trauma and recognize the patterns of abuse I had normalized. "What happened to you was extraordinary," she told me during an early session, "but the dynamics that allowed it to happen are unfortunately common. Abusers isolate, undermine, and gaslight their victims until reality itself seems fluid. Your instincts saved you. Those instincts, the ones that made me question the strange-smelling coffee, that prompted me to switch the mugs, had been there all along, it turns out. They had been muffled by the drugs and the constant gaslighting, but never completely silenced. Learning to trust them again has been a crucial part of my recovery. Professionally, I've rebounded with surprising speed. When news of what happened became public, former clients reached out with messages of support and new project offers. My story resonated with people, particularly women who had experienced their own versions of being undermined and controlled by partners or family members. Jasmine suggested I channel this connection into my design work, and that led to my current project, a series of transitional living spaces for women leaving abusive relationships. The first one opened last month, and seeing women and children finding safety and peace in a space I designed brings a depth of satisfaction I never experienced with my high-end residential projects. I've reconnected with family members who had been subtly pushed away during my marriage. My cousin Sophia, who Trevor always claimed was too dramatic. My uncle Philip, whose boisterous laugh Vivian found common. My college roommate Heather, who Vivian ironically used to praise when comparing her to me. Each reunion has been a reclamation of a piece of my identity that had been chipped away. The support group for survivors of domestic abuse that Jasmine introduced me to has become another lifeline. Sitting in a circle with women who understand the insidious nature of coercive control, how it creeps in gradually, disguised as love or concern, has helped me combat the shame that initially plagued me. How could I not have known? How could I have let this happen? These questions haunted me until Leah, a soft-spoken teacher in the group, gently pointed out. You didn't let anything happen. It was done to you deliberately and systematically by people who knew exactly what they were doing. 3 months ago, I had an unexpected encounter with Trevor. I was leaving my attorney's office when a familiar figure approached on the sidewalk. He had been released on bail pending his formal sentencing and looked thinner, grayer, the polished confidence replaced by a haunted weariness. He stopped a few feet away. Autumn, he said. My name barely audible. I didn't know you'd be here. I nodded, maintaining my distance. I had a meeting with Greg. You look well, he offered. Healthy. I am well, I confirmed. For the first time in years. He seemed to struggle with what to say next. I've been in therapy, trying to understand what I did to you. He stepped closer. I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. What I did was unforgivable. It was the first apology he'd offered that didn't include justifications or subtle blame. But standing there on that sunlit sidewalk, looking at the man who had methodically poisoned me to maintain control, I realized something important. His apology, sincere or not, wasn't necessary for my healing. I hope therapy helps you, Trevor, I said simply. Goodbye. And I walked away, my steps steady and sure, not looking back to see his reaction. That moment marked a turning point. I had faced my abuser and felt nothing but calm certainty in my decision to leave him behind. The fear, confusion, and lingering attachment had finally dissolved. The simple pleasure of knowing exactly what's in my cup is something I'll never take for granted again. The journey hasn't been easy. There are still nights when I wake up disoriented, momentarily back in that house with Trevor and Vivian. There are days when trusting new people feels impossible. The legal proceedings continue to drain my energy and resources. But there are also mornings like this one, clear, hopeful mine. There are friendships that have deepened through crisis. There is professional fulfillment in work that matters. There is the profound recognition of my own resilience. If there's a lesson in my story, perhaps it's this. Trust your instincts. That quiet voice inside that whispers, something isn't right, deserves your attention. The coffee that smells strange, the explanation that doesn't quite add up. The partner who claims to love you while systematically undermining your confidence. These aren't things to rationalize away or endure. They're alarms, and heeding them might just save you. I don't know what the future holds. Dating again seems like a distant possibility, one I approach with understandable caution. But I do know that whatever life brings next, I'll face it fully awake, fully present and fully myself. No one's prescription for who I should be, just the woman I've always been beneath the sedatives and gaslighting. Sometimes the smallest decisions, like switching coffee mugs, lead to the biggest revelations. And sometimes those revelations, painful as they may be, offer the path to freedom we didn't even know we needed. Have you ever had a gut feeling that something wasn't right in a relationship? Did you listen to it or ignore it? Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Remember, you deserve to live your life fully awake and fully yourself. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourselves and each other.